Sherman, maybe?
I mean, just to add about this idea of Southeast Asia, I mean, I made a film called Flooding in the Time of Drought, and that has like 10 languages inside, and it deals with, but it deals about Singapore, but it deals about the foreigners in Singapore. And that film, and then that's why I find Singapore so interesting, because it's actually Southeast Asia on this island. You have Southeast Asia on this particular island here. And like Singapore, it could be a city for Indonesians. You know, when they talk about Singapore is like one of their city. You know, they just take a plane and they go, oh, let's go to Singapore. It becomes like one city in Indonesia. So I mean, so again, like I mean, this idea of the relational, in the sense that probably now that Nick mentioned it, it didn't cross my mind that my work is also like that. It's always, I'm always making films Singapore in relation to something else. And for me, it was always in relation to the region, and particularly maybe more to Malaysia, because of that kind of ties. Singapore had family ties between the early founding fathers were all from, quite a number were from Malaysia. So I think, and also this, the point brought up by Kong was also very interesting, that film is being used as an illusion to sort of like control. And that goes back to the idea of the image. The image is a tool for you to change society. It's also it's a tool for you to control society. And that's why you have on the one extreme, the propaganda films. And then of course the other extreme is you have these activist films. They were trying, so this is a constant struggle. And then here we are in the middle about making narrative cinema that sits with documentary or sits with fiction. And that's why in my case, I don't categorize my work as whether they are documentary or fiction, because it's not important for me. And I think when I make my film, yeah, at some point I don't really know where I stand, because like with my films or with my identity, because like I think in Singapore they also want to know like, oh, where are you from, you know, like. And that we always get asked that question a lot, because of the national discussion that we have now about foreigners in Singapore. And also like, and also you get this idea like, and particularly because my work also I show in art exhibitions. So I have this kind of another issue which maybe also Apichatpong may share, like my films, they say, oh, this is not cinema enough for this show, because it is too installation. And then in the installation, the art world, they say this is too cinema to be in this exhibition. And then so as an artist, because I move between these two spaces, between the installation and between like the black box and the white box. I mean, here will be a black box, and then the white box will be in a gallery space. So these are the two spaces where the only difference could be your receiving of the information, because in a typical space of a black box tend to be more linear. The receiving of information is you have a captive audience and is more linear, whereas in a white box context of a gallery, you are receiving in loop. So the information is filtered through loop, and you can enter the work at a different point at any time, and you can walk away at any time. So I mean, that is something also to see. I mean, like for me, I do between two countries, between two worlds, like the art world and cinema world or something, and then between languages. So I mean, that is also what I think Southeast Asia is. I mean, finally, I think like U-WEI was mentioning when NAWAPOL said they have these funny problems about Thailand. I think Malaysia, we have even funnier problems with the politics. I mean, the politics are funnier than the newspaper.
Thanks very much, Sherman. I wanted to take up the point you made about, so it's crossing boundaries, right? It's crossing, including disciplinary boundaries in your case, art world and cinema, or performance, installation, cinema. Someone else here also at least describes himself, and that's NAWAPOL, right? You describe yourself as, I think so, crossing or making both independent type of film, but also mainstream commercial film. So that's also a kind of border crossing, about boundary crossing that you do. Can you say maybe something about that type of cross-disciplinary practice that you have?
Hard question again. Okay.
I was right? It's you, right?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, it's me.
Yeah.
While I'm making independent film 3 years ago, I was also writing the script for the film studio. And at the film studio, it's like I got the producers who has an intention to make the film for general audience. For me personally, I'm okay with both world, because it's like it's different intention, and you need to understand the approach of general audience to the cinema. It's quite different from the people in the film festival, but they're also audience. We have to respect them in some way. So, so for the past 3 years, I'm learning about independent film, making independent film. I'm also learning about making the mainstream film at the same time. Yes, and for me that's very good because I know the way, I know the approach to the how can I say? Sometimes I know some of my project is quite personal. It maybe the general audience can understand it because it needs some background about film knowledge, or you need to watch a lot of film, a lot of style before understanding this for general people. But in reality, general people has many interests. You know, sometimes you are not interested in golf. You are not interested in jet ski or something like that. So yeah. How can I say? It's very hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like there is two group of the audience.
Yeah. Are you also two different people when you're making different types of films? How do you are you different when you? I mean, how do you employ yourself? You know, yeah.
It's not that too different because actually my style share two modes, semi-experimental and semi-narrative sometimes. Like my short film yesterday. I think general audience can approach it, but the people in the film festival maybe watch it in a different mode also, something like this. So the producer called me to make a mainstream film because they know I can make a kind of narrative film, but we think my latest project will be kind of American indie. So a little bit small scale, but still communicate to general audience. And I think when I talk to the producer, actually they got good intention because they in one way they are businessmen. They need to invest for the film, but in one way they are also moviegoer. They try to they try to educate the general audience to make them understand more complicated film. So, but they just can't make the film like Apichatpong because that's too much, and we have Apichatpong already. In the same time, we have Pimak, we have Banjong, we have a Thai horror film, but we still lack of the film in between as a bridge between the art world and between the mainstream film. So for my project they intend to make this kind of film like American indie and hybrid, or the film in between studio film and art film. And I'm ready for it because I grew up with these two worlds. So I think I can do it, something like that.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to ask a final question, which is to any of the filmmakers who also maybe have to deal with these various types of boundary crossings, whether it's dealing with film and also other disciplines, or whether it's mainstream or indie or whatever. I will ask that, but I also want to tell you that after this we will then turn to you and invite questions and comments. So this just to alert you that in a few minutes time it's time for you to get involved in this discussion too. So coming back now, any of you have to deal with a similar kind of concerns?
So going back to the idea of roots, like the trees that grow in Southeast Asia are different from what you find in, the California, for example, and vice versa. So the land and the weather and, just the environment that dictates the kind of plants, obviously. And so I've always seen, when I approached making films as an ideal, not consciously going about drawing lines for myself and saying this is Singaporean, this is Southeast Asian, Ideally for me, as a creator, would be for it to come out of me naturally. And so that needed me to first of all acknowledge the shallowness of my teenage life. For example, when I would disdain Chinese, or I would prefer a cup of Starbucks coffee than kopitiam coffee, and not know why at all. And then I had an experience where I went to Indonesia and a friend of mine hosting me, and he was very upset that I went to buy Starbucks, and he was insistent that you should just go to a coffee shop. And then, so these things made me then realize how immature and how shallow was my thinking. And that if I were to make films with that kind of mindset, it would be disastrous. I mean, of course, there's a place for that too, but that is not my ideal. And then so I grew, and I begin to, and it doesn't help because again, it's not just for Singapore, but I speak for Singapore, when the surrounding reinforces the shallowness, the rootlessness, with just the amount of shopping malls and, historical sites torn down to build condos, there's this, it reinforces it. So I don't have a countryside to retreat to, mountains, countryside to kind of retreat to and reflect about these things. And so for me, I moved across the causeway, and it's just 10 minutes from the causeway, but at least it allows me to see these things from a distance and not get caught up in the rat race, so that the films that I make can naturally reflect my existence, my being. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Wesley, what boundaries are you crossing?
In regards to medium, or
it could be medium, it could be country, it could be language, it could be
for me,
mainstream, indie.
for me, in regards to medium, if I'm writing for television, for local television, I have to turn on my more commercial mindset. So I have to write something I feel general audience would appreciate. And then if I get to do my own film, like for example the film for Fragments, where the AFA were very supportive, and they gave all of us freedom to do nearly whatever we wanted to do. So with that, I'm able to do what I want to do without any restrictions. Of course, at the back of my mind, I'm also thinking, with the audience like this film, I think there's something that always is at the back of my mind. So for me, I also have to go between these two kind of persons in my head, one which is more commercial, and the other one which is more artistic in a way. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Chui.
Just because you talk about boundary, and I thought of this like a moment ago, and started from a conversation of yesterday lunch with Karen, and I asked her if it is true that most of the Singaporean film now, they are quite nostalgic. And I had not seen 7 Letters, but tell me, of the 7 Letters, how many of them are nostalgic, and why? And yeah, why is this like imagining or remembering the past, and mostly remember it like better than it was, or I mean, usually we will say like being nostalgic is because of you are being unhappy with the present, or you maybe have the fear of the future or something like that. And also during the lunch conversation with Nick, we talk a lot about the history and how we are the product of the history, and it's very important to know. And for the sake of argument, I actually tell Nick maybe it's not important at all, or maybe it's the future, we are just product of the future. And it was because of the future the history was made. It was always on the prediction of the future, on the planning, on how we see the future should be, and decisions are made and things are done. So maybe we should talk about the future. That's very Singapore. So, so I'm thinking like of a country who is quite pragmatic, like thinking a lot about future, and why the filmmakers now making so many nostalgic film, and we talk so much about the past, and actually what we really would do and what decide things we do. Like you choose certain film you watch, maybe not because of the past, not because of your history, but because maybe it's important, or maybe maybe you want to learn certain language. You want, I don't know. I maybe just for a shift we can talk about future and instead of the past. Yeah, that's the boundary.
Thanks very much. Let's see if they pick it up. U-WEI, maybe you want to. What boundaries are you crossing, or have you crossed?
I just want, from my experience, going through festivals and looking at programs, now I know actually, if a film, and then the director, and then in the name of the countries actually is not I know those are indication where the money are from actually. It doesn't usually says where the film are from, and so because basically film is equal to money, yeah. And then that's where our friends here are talking about commercial and so-called personal films. I can say this for me though. Yeah. I don't do too many films. I've not done many films, but then I do cherish on the problems of the world we got. I think my whole story is about if there's no problem in this world, it's very difficult for me to work, I guess. You know, so I cherish the issues that we got. You know, that's why I think it's very difficult to do a film on Gandhi probably because he got not much problem. So I think that's what that's what I guess we have to create the problems. So and in Malaysian context, if I can share a little bit, you know, that there are 2 kinds of films being made. You know, one film is films that invite the audience to dream. You know. To dream on, to have a happy ending, or to have a love story in form of this kind of genres. And there are films that after the film will ask, "This is my life now. What about your life?" That kind of film. There are few like that. So these 2 kind of films has been produced by 2 kind of people also. 2 kind of setup. One is the so-called the studio, and one is so-called the independent. And but then it's not so clear about these 2 because the studio, the so-called studio, in which is maybe there's 3 in Malaysia, behave like a independent. Actually, they do films like independent films. If you look films as in content, you know, because I think I would love to see studios that will push the boundary of the technology. But then if you look at the Malaysian films, the so-called the big films, is, for example, Songlap or Terbaik dari Langit or Lelaki, those are produced by studios, but looks more like a so-called independent films. It's so basically for me on my I only want, there are only few stories I can tell, and basically there's one story. The rest I just repeat myself actually for the last 6 years, 6 films. You know, I just camouflage it a little bit here and there, but it's still about alienation. It's still about and pain. You know, so it's interesting for me from the young guys. To me, they are very certain that the commercial, because the commercial part, the independent part, you know, I'm learning today actually, because for me it's very blurred. To me, a filmmaker, there's one film to make, you know, and then they just do what film they wanted to do, you know. So, yeah, I think.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thank you. And finally, Z, you want to?
Yes.
What boundaries are you crossing?
Okay. You know that I just made 2 films, and I can save some money. And then always the ability that one day I can like retire and grow some pig or rice, something like that. And it's quite simple. And because of that, the audience is not like really something is important with me. I don't care about too much about the audience. To be honestly, I can say that because when you making the film, it's not to. You should to make the things you really believe on and you really love, and that's all. I think that, and if you can do that, if you can do the things you want, it means that you feel it. You can have the whole the thing that you need from the cinema. So why? So why we have to concern too much about the audience? Yes, it's simple like that. And you can grow up. Yes, honestly, I can grow the big and dry, and I can open the restaurant to survive. So it's simple. It's very easy. So, yeah. And it doesn't mean that the movie is a whole the meaning of my life.
Thanks very much.